Hello, everybody here. My name is Jörg. As you said already, I'm the CEO and co-founder of Outrigger. And what do we do as Outrigger? So as a company, we exist since more or less 10 years. So we have a little bit of an anniversary today. And our company was actually already founded with the vision of data portability in mind. So what we basically do is we have a software as a service, web-based migration tool, which helps you to switch your email or groupware provider. So groupware is a very broad term. Most of you might know, like Microsoft Exchange or something like that. But also all the data you have in there, like contacts, calendars, tasks, which might also be used in different services than just groupware services. And yeah, as I said, it's a self-service tool, so you can try it out by yourself. If you go to a website, www.outrigger.com, there is a user interface where you select the source provider and the destination provider, and enter your credentials, and you can do actually the transfer of the data. So actually pretty close to what GDPR Article 20 is envisioning in a way. And especially also we act as an intermediary here. So we are not by ourselves the source or the destination provider, but we are like an independent entity. And we also do support what the GDPR calls the direct transfer. So it's not that the user downloads a file and uploads a file, but we do the automatic total transfer of the data from the source to the destination. And a simple example, like you could have a user migrating from Google G Suite to Office 365 or Microsoft 365, how it's called now, and copy over all the emails, all the calendars, all the contacts, and so on. We do that actually, so you can use our service as a direct user, but our main business case is actually to cooperate with hosting companies and ISPs. So some of our customers, for instance, are Amazon Web Services, Ionos, Liberty Global, GoDaddy Europe. So quite a number of well-known hosting brands, and they basically use our service to onboard. Yeah? So that's why we typically say we are doing migration, because typically the perspective is from the person onboarding to the new provider. But if you think about it, data portability is actually the reverse, yeah, or the other side of the coin, because it's directed to the provider where people go away from. And interestingly, in the past years, we also tried to sell our hosting partners the idea of switching away, like this data portability approach. But obviously, most of them were motivated to gain new customers, and since there was no law in place, only very few thought about also making the offboarding easy. So that's what we do. So what did we actually now do within DAPSI on top of that? So maybe very shortly, as a motivation, our domain. So obviously, I think email groupware is one of the largest domains in terms of personal data on the internet. And there is some of these systems do have APIs. There is even standards, most of you know, like vCard or iCalendar. However, in many cases, these standards in a way are not really built for portability in a strict sense, and also have their problems. You need to upload a file again, which makes it tricky, and also the properties are not always well matched. So in what I presented you before, like Office 365 Gmail, we typically use the existing APIs, legacy APIs by the vendors. We also do have connectors for Cartograph CalDAV with those limitations, and but there are still a lot of systems, like especially webmail systems, like you might know Roundcube, which is more or less the best well-known open source and free webmail system. A lot of ISPs and email providers use. And these systems, in some cases, don't even have the vCard export functionality. And so we thought about how can we improve that, and how can we make data portable for the millions of users of these systems. And there is actually something going on in the IETF in terms of standards, which is called the JMAP protocol. So there is a JMAP working group, which initially started to build something like a better IMAP for accessing email data. But over time, actually, the work of this working group also extended to other data you have in a groupware system, like contacts, calendars, and so on. And the interesting thing is that this seems to evolve also in a way to a kind of an interoperability protocol for all the different types you have in such a groupware system based on IETF standards. And so we joined forces basically with that activity, and we are also a member of the CalConnect consortium, which is very tightly related to that IETF working group. And yeah, so we basically already contributed to the contact and calendar standards in parts, and within DAPSI we especially pushed forward also a whole new IETF draft for tasks, for instance, which was not so much addressed now. And yeah, so the overall idea is basically that this can be a future standard actually to be adopted by groupware, webmail, but also like, you know, task management, contact management, maybe CRM systems. So all systems that deal in some or the other way with this contact calendar task data, which is very fundamental to many of our daily work processes. And on the other hand, there are then also, if servers do expose that in a large fashion, there is of course a large incentive for client applications, maybe on desktop, maybe on mobile, to also adapt that and yeah, be more interoperable with the existing systems. And yeah, you might know, for instance, especially on mobile, the situation is mostly that there is like ActiveSync very popular, which is a very proprietary protocol by Microsoft and also not covering all the data. So certainly there's also a lot of a benefit for mobile application ecosystem here. And there is actually even some of those applications popping up. So there is in the NGI Pointer initiative, which is kind of a sister project to NGI DAPSI, as far as I understood it. There is an Android client developed further, which is basically also using or basing on this JMAP standard. Yeah, there is basically on that approach with introducing JMAP as an intermediary API. I already told a little bit. There is two benefits you could draw from this. So one is actually the classic user switching to another provider or import-export case, which basically we do support in our daily business. But also, as I mentioned before already, if that API is in place once, also a little more different data portability cases can be achieved. Like, you know, something I would call it maybe incremental data portability, where you have maybe a client interacting with two different data storages or something like that. So, you know, data portability not always is just import, export, or switching hard from one provider to the other. But of course, it's also concerned to use case where users can share data between different apps. And I think the important message here is that work on JMAP basically is neutral in terms of the actual data portability approach followed by or used by user or by server provider, and many different scenarios are possible here. So what have we been doing within OpenXport in particular, besides contributing to the standardization? So we also started implementing things, and one of the major achievements we have is that we bootstrapped a number of plugins for popular open source webmail systems. I already mentioned RunCube. Many of you might also know Nextcloud or Hordy, which is used by a lot of universities. And we basically developed after this standard first implementations for these different webmailers to enable them speaking JMAP, and yeah, so that they can be used for all these different use cases. And this is still ongoing work to a certain extent, so there is functionality already there, especially in terms of contacts and calendars. But it might not yet support the absolute full breadth of the JMAP API, which is quite powerful and so on. But of course, that's also the open source idea here, that there is maybe some uptake by the community. As a side effect also, we will maybe come up with a generic JMAP adapter for file storage systems. This is not yet released, but under development. But this is something that came across also during the development. And there is also some pieces of JMAP library code, which, for instance, other open source projects could use in order to write plugins for their own system in order to make it compatible with those JMAP standards. And there's also some interest by vendors that came to contact to us also due to our DAPSI involvement and hearing about all these activities, and yeah, we're already working on that. So we are very confident that maybe that will really become some kind of widespread standards in here. We are also using this kind of software obviously within our own platform. So we have also to our our SaaS self-service migration platform, we have an adapter which allows us also to access these kind of plugins, for instance, in order to migrate from Roundcube to Office 365 or the other way around. And we are actually also using these kind of plugins developed within DAPSI in actual projects where we do.
And can you please conclude? Thank you.
Yeah, I'm already finished. Thanks. Yeah, if you wanna have a look by yourself, there is our GitHub account where you can find all the source. There is a link to the ITF specs, and yeah, if there's any questions, just come contact us, and we are looking forward to continue working on this also in the future. Thanks.